Episode 68, Afterward. Afterward. So I wanted to write a quick afterword, first to thank all of you that reached the end of this story. Writing this has been an absolute delight for me, and seeing your reactions to it has given me a great deal of confidence in my own abilities. When I started this, I didn't know if I would be any good. Now, after writing it and seeing your reactions, I feel like maybe I have some talent that I can put to good use. Outside of the first several chapters, I have been the sole writer and editor for this project. I did have a beta reader near the beginning, and I greatly appreciate the early advice he gave me that helped me course correct a few issues, grammatical, continuity, etc., that could have persisted throughout, if he hadn't caught them. Unfortunately, for various reasons, he was unable to keep beta reading for me, but his help was very instrumental for me early on. So, if you read this, thanks, Landon, for your help. When I set out to write this, I knew right away that I needed to get a few things right. First and foremost, I needed to get the characters right. Link and Zelda, obviously. I planned a romance for them, of course, but I also wanted each of them to be developed enough to stand alone as a character. I didn't just want Zelda to be Link's romance interest. I wanted her to be the hero of her own story. We may not have seen a lot of her side, but I still wanted her to be a fully rounded character, not only with the strengths and weaknesses depicted in the game, but other things that made her seem like a living, breathing person. Link, too, needed to be real. He needed to be more than a strong, stoic hero. He needed his own interests, fears, motivations, and flaws. I tried very hard to do that with him, and your responses seem to indicate that I succeeded, for the most part. Beyond them, however, Breath of the Wild has a lot of very popular characters. I knew that I couldn't screw up Sidon or Cass, for example, but there is also a very large Mifa fanbase out there, too, that I didn't dare disappoint. That's to say nothing of those of you that love Riju, Urbosa, Rivali, Tiba, or any of the other champions. And then there were the Sheikah as well. I decided to take the risk with re-aging Pura because I thought it would make for a fun character arc of her own. It bugged me how, in the game, Link showed up and she just stopped doing anything for herself. And, of course, Paya, I wanted to explore a side to her that the game never showed. But I liked the idea of her being trained as a Sheikah Shadow, someone that an assassin might not expect to be able to fight back. And then there was the world itself. I wanted Hyrule to be as alive on paper as it felt to me when I first played Breath of the Wild. Running around that world enraptured me in a way that I don't think any other open-world game has done so. I just loved being able to climb the mountains and gaze around, or paraglide off of towers. And I wanted to capture some of that joy in how Link views and interacts with the world. And while I didn't include every single bit of wonder that the game has to offer, I know some of you were really hoping that I would introduce the Great Fairy Sisters, who I assure you do exist in my world. I tried to make it feel both grounded and magical at the same time. I don't think I wrote everything perfectly. There are characters that I introduced that I wish I had been able to spend more time developing, Grante especially. He's one that I originally had a few more plans for, but ended up cutting some of that stuff before it ever got written due to pacing problems. However, I still introduced him and liked his introduction, so I decided to keep him in. Telma is another one that I'm ashamed to say that I almost completely forgot about in part 3 until a commenter asked me about her, which is why she got a side quest scene at the end. I originally had her showing up after the Battle of Hateno and Mount Lanero, but ended up going another route, which became the side quests 3 chapter. I also wished I had done a little more research for the sake of world building early on. Getting an idea of what the former population of Hyrule was, as well as the current population count, mapping out other settlements and towns to add, and getting a better understanding of how places like Hateno and Kakariko would actually look in a more realistic setting are all things that I developed later than I probably should have. This is one of those things that, if I eventually do future revisions, I will be looking to flesh out more. But, overall, I'm very happy with what I wrote. I think I did far more things right than wrong, and the response you all gave me has been incredible. If you've read my previous author's notes, you know that writing this has been extremely important to me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I can't go into a lot of details, mostly just for privacy's sake, but I first started writing this story because I was going to be away from my family for an extended period of time on a work trip. Between 9 and 10 months. I started jotting down ideas early on, mostly because I was bored and missing my wife and kids. But as I began to fill up a notebook with ideas, plot points, and character arcs, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could give this a shot. And so I did. On January 18, 2018, I sat down with my laptop and wrote the prologue, and probably part of Chapter 1. And from that point, I was hooked. Much of my free time was taken up tapping away at my laptop, putting words and ideas to digital paper. Some people might say it took too much of my free time, and I'm willing to admit that they're probably right. But it became my hobby. Writing this, in some ways, became my lifeline and the thing I turned to when I found myself missing home. It was easy for me to relate to Link, who longed for a life and people he loved, even if he didn't always remember them. And somewhere along the way, writing the story became, itself, a motivation. I loved writing this. It's something I'm proud of and consider an accomplishment. And it definitely left me hungering for more. Which brings me to the future. Many of you have been asking about a sequel, and I've certainly left enough open threads to make one. I've spoken of having plans and ideas for the future, but I haven't yet confirmed anything. So let me do so now. I am writing a sequel to Breath of the Wild. Right now, it is tentatively called Secrets of the Past, and it will deal with, among other things, events in the modern era, events 100, or so, years past, and events 10,000 years prior. There is a major focus on the Sheikah and the Yiga, their history together, and the schism between them and the royal family. I'm excited to write more about the Sheikah, because of the various cultures I built up in Breath of the Wild. I feel as though the Sheikah were the ones I left fairly undeveloped. Of course, Link and Zelda will be the two primary POV characters, and we will also be dealing with their ongoing decisions regarding the kingdom, as well as some other internal and external conflicts that will shape them. I also intend to feature other POV characters as well, though I haven't fully decided on who they all will be. Pura, however, is definitely someone who will be getting some page time. She's just so much fun to write, and I'm curious to see how I can flesh out her character more while keeping her sarcastic, irreverent attitude. She'll be a nice challenge. However, here's the bad news. This story is a long way off from being ready to post. I started writing it early September, when I finished the draft of Breath of the Wild, but I soon found out that grad school, work, preparing to go home after a long absence, and conducting heavy revisions on my story, which had just been increased to 3-a-week chapter posting, took up a lot of time. So while I started the sequel, I'm only about 2.5 chapters into it. And I'm still not totally sure if I like them yet or not. The third chapter will definitely stay, but the first 2 chapters are up in the air. I'm also still working on figuring out exactly what I'm going to put into it. There are plot points that I'm still developing, and my outline is pretty basic so far. I have some great ideas that I think will blow people away, but I'm still working out how to get to those big moments. Furthermore, and this isn't a bad thing in any way for me, but I'm home now. And my time for writing has been effectively chopped in half, if not even less than that. No more writing 43,000 words in a week for me. Home life has reasserted itself, which feels great, but it does mean that it's going to take me longer to write. The good news, however, is that this novel is not going to be 450,000 words long. I'm envisioning this as about 150,000, at most, and hopefully even closer to around 100,000. I wrote the massive epic fantasy tome, now I want to practice writing a story that is actually of a publishable length. Of course, Breath of the Wild was originally supposed to be 300,000 words, so who knows what's going to happen. For now, I don't have a timeline. I'd like to get far enough in it to start posting chapters, likely one a week at the beginning, early after the new year, but that is going to depend on a lot of factors. If I suddenly get huge amounts of inspiration and write half of it in a few weeks, I assure you that I'll start posting sooner. However, I don't want to start something that I can't finish. I won't have my novel be another of those half-finished works on the site that will never get updated again because life got in the way. When I start posting, I want to be far enough along to have a clear vision of how I'm going to finish this and be far enough ahead to be able to keep posting regularly until the end, even if I experience some delays due to life. Also, I expect this to be the last story I write for this Breath of the Wild world. I doubt I'll write another sequel after it, but I suppose we'll have to see what comes. I'm certainly attached to the world, but I've also been toying around with some ideas for an original work that I may start writing after this story. I'd love to take the lessons I've learned in cutting my writing teeth on this novel and the next and translate them into something I can possibly publish. In the meantime, for those of you that are wanting a little bit more in this style, I wanted to point you in the direction of my own personal favorite author, whose style I tried to imitate while writing this. I love the works of Brandon Sanderson, and if you are looking for some fantastic epic fantasy works, with a huge focus on strong character development across a large cast of easy-to-love, or hate characters, heroic action sequences, and complex magic systems, I definitely recommend you check him out. Now, for this story, I do intend on posting at least one more bonus to round things out. I have a document labeled Scraps that contains about 24,000 words of cut content from this story. I don't plan to post it all, and frankly, there's no need to. Some of it might closely mirror a scene we got with a single line or two changed, and some of it is just plain bad. However, I plan to go through it and pick out some alternate scenes and sequences to share with you all. As a little preview, I will say that one of the scenes is an alternate Mount Lanera scene that plays out a little differently than what I put in it. I went back and forth on which one I would use, and ultimately chose the one we got, but I'm still very fond of the other. So I'll let you have it, too, and you can tell me which one you prefer. Other things will be sequences and things that got cut for a variety of reasons. Maybe I just couldn't make the scene work, or it wasn't what was needed. None of them are going to be heavily edited, however, so some of the writing may be rough. Like the alternate and unfinished scenes in a movie, I'm going to give these to you as is, rather than trying to make them look great. Each one will be accompanied by a little bit of commentary on why it was cut or what I was going for. Expect this to go up sometime next week. Not sure what day yet, but it'll be soon. Another thing I've been toying with is possibly taking all of the memories in the novel and rearranging them in chronological order. I don't know when I'll get around to doing that, however, as I'd like to include some of the shorter flashes of memory, but if I include those, I'd like to actually develop those scenes out a little bit more. Personally, I'm a little curious myself to see if they're all pretty consistent in tone and continuity, considering I wrote them as I went. I wouldn't be surprised to find that I missed a detail here or there, and putting them all together like that would help me figure those out, in case I ever revisit this story and do further revisions. Let me just say thank you, one more time. Thanks for reading this story, for the comments, the favorites, the overall support that you've given me as I went on this journey, myself. It has, at times, been an emotional one for me. I originally started writing this purely for my own sake. I told the story that I wanted to read. But I'm so glad that I ultimately decided to share it with you all, as I do think it made it a far better story as a result. It's been awesome, and I look forward to sharing more ideas with you in the future. Ben, the Z of Ages. P.S. Also, thank you for reading this afterward. I know that I did some rambling here, but I wasn't sure all of what I wanted to say until I was halfway through it. End of chapter. End of book. This is a random audiobook appeared, signing off.